Welcome all to Whispers in the Dark, where shadows breathe and forgotten voices stir. Step beyond the veil and lose yourself in a realm where reality fractures and nightmares whisper lullabies. Here we conjure true psychological thrillers, haunted tales, and horror stories that burrow deep beneath your skin and nestle in the quiet corners of your mind. Each story crackles like old film reels, unspooling secrets too heavy for daylight. Whether it's the slow unraveling of a fractured psyche or the cold caress of something unseen lurking just behind you, we promise narratives that will haunt you long after the final word is spoken. So get ready, dim the lights, slip on your headphones and listen closely for the whispers in the dark, and subscribe if you dare to return.
We were just supposed to be out for a weekend hike, nothing crazy. Just 3 friends getting away from the noise of the city, me, Ryan, and James. We parked near the trailhead just after noon with plans to hike the ridge camp overnight and head back in the morning, but somewhere along mile 5, Ryan needed to take a leak, and James spotted a small cement restroom building just off the trail tucked into a thick patch of trees. It didn't look like it belonged there. The concrete was yellowed and cracked. The signage faded, but we shrugged it off, figured it was part of an older site, maybe forgotten when they rerouted the trails. So we followed the narrow path to it, and that's where everything started to go wrong. As soon as I stepped inside, the air changed. It wasn't just the smell of mold or piss, it was like the atmosphere itself shifted. The light dimmed. Even though the sun was high and hot outside, the buzzing of a single flickering fluorescent overhead echoed unnaturally, and when I looked back, the door was gone. I blinked, thinking my eyes were playing tricks, but James and Ryan stood frozen too. Their faces pale and confused, the concrete walls now stretched far beyond what they should have. The room expanded into a hallway lined with identical stalls. None of them had doors. The tiles on the floor were cracked and stained with something brown and flaking. But what hit me hardest was the sound or lack of it. No wind, no birds, just the flickering light and our breathing. I called out for them, but my voice came back wrong, muffled like it didn't belong to me. James stepped forward first, saying, "Maybe there's another exit. Maybe this is just a maintenance corridor or something," but his voice was swallowed by the air like we were underwater. We started walking slowly together past row after row of decaying toilets, broken sinks and rusted hand dryers. The hallway twisted subtly as we moved, and I swear I saw it curve in on itself, creating impossible geometry. Like the walls were folding in directions they shouldn't. The floor became tacky, our shoes sticking slightly with every step, and then we heard it. A dragging sound far behind us, a wet, heavy pull, like something crawling toward us from where we entered. Ryan turned to look, but the hallway behind us was different now, longer, darker, and no sign of where we came in. We started moving faster. Panic, bubbling under our skin. Every stall we passed seemed darker than the last. The ceilings lower, and then James screamed. Something had reached out from one of the stalls. I didn't see what it was. Just a glimpse of too many fingers, too long and jointed wrong. Grasping at his hoodie, we pulled him free and ran, not caring which direction we took, just to anywhere. But there the air got thicker with every turn. The lights flickered faster, and the dragging sound grew louder, closer. I looked back once and saw something round and pale with a stretched face moving on all fours. Its mouth hung open like it was gasping, but no sound came out, just a faint high-pitched hum that made my teeth hurt. James started to lag behind, limping from where the thing had grabbed him, his legs swollen and bruised and pulsing like it had been injected with something. Ryan grabbed him, slung him over his shoulder, and we kept moving my chest burning from the stale air and the growing sense that we weren't in a place people were meant to be. The walls changed again, now covered in peeling wallpaper that pulsed like skin breathing slow and wrong. The stalls were gone, replaced by endless doors, some open, some locked, some slightly ajar behind one. I swear I heard my own voice begging for help. But it wasn't me. And when I turned to ask the others if they heard it, they weren't there. I spun around heart-slamming, but I was alone the hallway now, lit with dim yellow lights buzzing like hornets and casting deep shadows that shifted. Even when I stood still, I called their names until my throat went raw. I banged on doors, screamed until the skin on my knuckles split, but the hallway just stretched further. The buzzing louder, the air thicker, like breathing through wet cloth. And then from one of the doors came the dragging, again, louder, faster, closer. I ran blindly passing doors that now bled at the hinges. I slipped more than once on things I couldn't see in the dark, but I never stopped. I didn't dare, the thing was always just behind me, always just around the last corner. I couldn't see it anymore, but I could feel it. Its breath on my neck, the way the walls seemed to close in. The more I panicked, and just when I thought I couldn't run anymore, when my legs screamed and my head felt like it would burst, the light ahead changed. I saw a small red exit sign flickering above a single metal door. I reached it, clawed it open, and fell through into bright sunlight. I hit dirt, rolled and gasped for air, real airbirds chirping wind, blowing my skin, burning from the sudden light, and when I looked back, there was no door, no building, just trees and the faint sound of buzzing, fading into nothing. I was only supposed to deliver a chart that's all just a routine task near the end of my shift at St. Jude's, a private hospital tucked away on the east side, where I worked nights as a nurse aide. The hallways always felt too quiet after midnight. The kind of silence that made your own footsteps sound criminal. The overhead fluorescents buzzed a little louder than usual, and the waxed linoleum reflected them in a sickly yellow tint as if the floor itself was unwell. I was carrying a patient's updated chart to the records room at the far end of the administrative wing. A hallway not often used anymore since they'd moved most files to digital, but policy required backups. I didn't mind the walk. The quiet helped me think, but tonight something was different. As I turned the final corner that led to the storage corridor, I swear the hallway stretched longer than it should have. The lights above flickered slightly, and though my steps felt normal, the air began to feel heavy, like I had walked into a room thick with humidity. But there was no change in temperature, no hum of machinery, just a dense, invisible weight pressing in around me. I reached the end of the corridor, where the file room door should have been, but instead there was another hallway, one I had never seen before. No signage, no wall art, just bare faded yellow wallpaper curling at the seams, and a muted buzzing that seemed to come from nowhere. I turned around to backtrack, but the corridor behind me was gone, replaced by the same wallpapered hall, identical, stretching out in both directions. I stood frozen, my brain fumbling for an explanation. Maybe a trick of the mind, maybe I took a wrong turn, maybe stress was getting to me. I tried my radio static, I tried my phone. No signal. I called out, "Hello," and my voice came back, warped, not echoing. Just wrong, like it had passed through something and been altered. I walked forward slowly, pressing my hand against the wall. It felt too soft, like the drywall was damp or breathing. I reached a corner and turned left, then right. Then another hallway opened wider, the lights above flickering like fireflies caught in jars, and the walls now lined with empty picture frames, each one containing nothing but a dark void that seemed to ripple slightly when I passed. I felt watched, but not seen, like whatever was here didn't need eyes. I started to move faster, trying door handles, but they were either locked or led to more halls, or worse, small identical rooms, each one humming faintly, some filled with decrepit furniture, others with nothing but shadows. I checked my watch, but the time didn't change. The seconds hand frozen in place no matter how long I stared. It was then I heard something behind me, a sound that defied understanding. Not footsteps, but the echo of movement, like fabric dragging against skin, and a low droning breath that made my stomach twist. I didn't look back, I just ran, turning at every intersection, hoping for an exit or a sign, or even a window. But all I found were more halls, more decay, and the unrelenting buzz of the lights above me. I stopped at one point to catch my breath, heart slamming against my ribs, and in the silence I heard a voice calling my name, not loudly but intimately, like someone whispering into my ear. Even though I was alone, it was my mother's voice, but she'd been dead for 5 years. I turned slowly and saw no one, just a hallway that now slanted slightly upward, as if I were being funneled into something larger or deeper. I kept going, because what else could I do? I opened another door, this one different, heavier, and found what looked like an operating room inside lights swinging slowly above the table, but no equipment and no walls, just an expanse of yellow stretching outward infinitely in all directions, and something at the far edge, just beyond sight, standing still, but vibrating slightly like static. I backed out, closed the door, and ran again, turning blindly until I tripped and fell, scraping my knees on the jagged tile beneath me. When I stood up, the hallway had changed again, now filled with hospital beds, each one occupied by something covered in stained sheets, all breathing slowly, audibly as I passed. I didn't dare look. I just kept walking, eyes forward, ears filled with the rhythmic inhalation and exhalation of what should not be alive. And then suddenly I was back in the corridor, the real one, the one at St. Jude's, my knees bleeding, my hands trembling, the chart still in my other hand, and the file room door right in front of me. I stumbled in, collapsed onto the floor, and screamed. Someone eventually found me. They said I'd been missing for 10 minutes tops, but I swear I was gone for hours. Maybe longer. My watch had stopped at 1:13 a.m., the exact time I turned that corner, and no matter how many batteries I replace or how many times I reset it, it always stops at that time. And sometimes when I'm walking past that wing again, I hear the buzzing, faint but insistent. It started like any other late night on my way home from work, just past 1 a.m. The subway station at Lexington was mostly empty except for a few scattered people waiting on cold benches, eyes buried in phones or hidden under hoodie shadows. I had taken this route 100 times before descending the stairs, hearing that mechanical screech of an incoming train echo through the tunnels, like some ancient metal beast dragging itself along unseen tracks. But that night, the air felt heavier, like it was weighed down by something invisible, pressing into my skin. As I reached the bottom step, I noticed the turnstile gate closest to the emergency stairwell was broken, dangling half open. Not uncommon in this part of town. I glanced down the tunnel where the tracks curved into darkness, then back at the platform, but something was wrong. It felt off. The lighting was dimmer, more yellow than usual, and the tiles beneath my feet looked smeared as if wet. But when I crouched down to touch them, they were dry, just warped. I moved toward the end of the platform, trying to find a better spot to wait. But as I turned the corner past the last pillar, I saw a door I had never noticed before set into the far wall, painted the same sickly cream color as the tile around it. Something about it called to me, not in a way I could explain, but more like a pressure at the base of my skull, a magnetic pull. I told myself it was just a maintenance door, and maybe I shouldn't. But before I could finish the thought, my hand was already on the knob, turning it, and stepping through the door slammed behind me. The sound swallowed instantly by a deafening silence. I spun around, but the door was gone, completely replaced by seamless yellow walls and buzzing fluorescent lights. Overhead the floor was carpeted in some old stained material that smelled of mold, and something chemical like an office building abandoned for decades and left to rot. I stood still, trying to slow my breathing, but every sound I made echoed strangely. The acoustics all wrong, like I was underwater or inside something hollow and alive. I pulled out my phone, no signal, no Wi-Fi, nothing. I walked slowly, calling out tentatively, "Hello," just to hear my own voice, but it came back distorted like it wasn't mine or hadn't started from me at all. The hallway stretched out in both directions with no end in sight, each turn revealing more of the same sickening walls, buzzing lights, and that same dreadful carpet. Sometimes the ceiling dipped so low I had to crouch. Then it would suddenly expand into massive open rooms with pillars that seemed to serve no purpose, just endless support for a ceiling that pulsed faintly above. I kept walking, trying to find a way back, some sign of exit, but the air began to change. It became damp, then dry, then heavy with static, like walking through layers of invisible pressure, and every so often I heard something dragging. Something breathing, not close but not far either. I began to pass things, a child's shoe, mouldy and crusted with time, a payphone hanging off the wall, the receiver swinging slowly, a broken shopping cart tipped over in a corner. All of them covered in that same yellow hue, like the place had swallowed them too. I felt something shift behind me, once not physically, but in the light it flickered just enough to show a shape there, then gone too fast to register, but not fast enough to forget. I broke into a run, panicking, turning corners, blindly hearing the dragging sound grow louder. Not footsteps, but something scraping unevenly like skin against carpet. I passed a mirror hanging crookedly, and for a second I saw myself. Then the reflection didn't move when I did it, just smiled. I stopped screaming, only when my voice cracked too dry to continue. I stumbled into a small side room filled with office cubicles, all empty, but each with a chair facing the wrong way, like someone had stood up in unison and walked away. I hid there for what felt like hours until the buzzing stopped. That was worse than the sound itself. The silence it left behind, it made the space feel enormous, endless. I finally stood and walked again until I saw a door. A real door, one I hadn't passed before. Red exit sign above it flickering, but there, clear, solid and desperate. I ran to it, shoved it open and spilled out into a stairwell, damp and dark and real. I climbed upward until I burst through another door into the subway station, the real one, but it was empty. No trains, no people, just a hollow silence, and when I looked at the time, it was still 1 a.m., exactly as when I first walked through that door. I rushed out onto the street, into the cold night air, knees shaking, chest heaving with relief. But as I passed a reflective window, I caught my own image, and my reflection didn't smile. It didn't mimic me. It only stared with wide, hollow eyes like it had been waiting, and I swear, just before I turned away, its lips began to move, mouthing something silently. Something that felt like a warning, or maybe a promise. It started with a stupid bet me and Sean dared each other to beat that busted old light gun game in the far corner of the arcade. The one no one ever touched anymore. The screen flickered like it had seizures and the speaker crackled like a dying insect. But we had hours to kill and too much caffeine to sit still. So we laughed, shoved in some tokens, and started blasting our way through glitchy waves of pixelated monsters. The weird thing was the game didn't seem to end every time we thought it was over. A new level started, and the screen got darker, more distorted. The music started playing backward, or maybe just slowed down until it sounded like whispers grinding through static. Eventually the room felt like it dimmed too, not just the screen. The overhead lights, the neon walls, even the sound of the other games seemed to muffle. We didn't notice at first. We were locked in shooting, growling shapes that didn't match their sprites anymore, just strange black blobs that lunged without warning. Then the screen glitched hard for a second, flashed white and went black, and before we could even joke about it, the power went out. Not the whole arcade, just the row we were in. Everything behind us looked distant like a tunnel, and we were both already leaning forward as if something on that screen had pulled us closer. Sean reached behind the cabinet to see if something unplugged, and when he did, he said he felt cold like a breeze, but there was no vent there, just a thin seam in the wall behind the game cabinet, like a panel outline we'd never noticed before. I touched it, and it opened. No resistance, just swung inward, like it wanted to be found beyond. It was a narrow hallway, walls covered in stained yellow wallpaper. The floor was damp carpet, and overhead lights buzzed in an endless row. We looked at each other, unsure if it was some secret maintenance tunnel or something cooler and stupider, and before we could think better of it, we stepped through and the door vanished behind us. Gone like it had never been there. The air was stale with a chemical rot like old glue and mildew. Every footstep made a wet squish. The lights above flickered randomly but never went fully out. We yelled a few times, hoping someone would hear us, but the sound died too fast, like the space itself absorbed noise. We walked straight ahead for what felt like 20 minutes, never hitting a wall or corner, just that endless yellow corridor stretching forward with a sameness that made our heads ache. Sean said it felt like the air pressure was wrong too, like something was squeezing us the longer we stayed in. Then we started hearing things first. It was just the buzzing. Then a soft tapping, like fingernails on wood somewhere ahead, then clicking. Then a voice, but not one we could place. It didn't echo right, and it didn't come from a direction, just slipped into our ears like a thought we didn't have. Sean froze at one point and said his name had been called, not shouted but whispered, almost lovingly. We kept walking until we hit a dead end. Not a wall, just a room where the hallway bled into an open space, the same yellow walls, the same damp carpet. Except now there were objects, chairs stacked in the corner, an overturned mop bucket, a child's shoe soaked in black grime, and a vending machine with its front glass shattered. I asked if he remembered passing any of that on the way in. He shook his head, and then we noticed the footprints, wet ones, too many, going in circles, then stopping abruptly as if the person just ceased to exist, mid-step. I turned to tell him we had to go, but he was staring past me, mouth open, eyes wide, and I knew not to look, but I did anyway. And something was crawling down the wall on the far side of the room, long arms longer than they should be. With too many joints, its body half sunken into the drywall, like it was part of the structure, peeling away from it. Its head was smooth, no features, just a stretch of pale skin that pulsed with shallow breaths we ran. I don't remember how long or how far. Just that. The corridor never ended, and that thing kept following. Not fast, just steady, like it knew we'd exhaust ourselves. We passed more rooms, some filled with broken arcade machines, others with filing cabinets toppled and scratched, like animals had tried to get in or out. I screamed at one point when the lights cut out entirely just for a second, but it was enough to hear the wet dragging, just feet behind me. We turned another corner, and Sean vanished. I swear I didn't let go of him. I swear I felt his hand the whole time. But when I turned, he was just gone. No sound. No scream, just me and the stink of mold and static. I kept running, shouting his name, sobbing until I collapsed. And when I opened my eyes, I was back in the arcade. Lights, normal kids, laughing games, beeping as if nothing happened. Except I was alone. And no one had seen us leave. And no one remembered Sean. Even the game we played wasn't there anymore. Just an empty space with dust on the floor, like nothing had been plugged in for years. I only went into the restroom because my stomach was killing me. It was one of those low-rent outlet malls, the kind where half the stores are boarded up and the food court has more pigeons than people. I'd eaten some sketchy-looking orange chicken, and 15 minutes later, I was speed-walking past a broken massage chair looking for the nearest bathroom. The sign pointed down a service hallway, one of those long, echoey ones with grey concrete floors and buzzing lights overhead. It already felt off. I remember thinking there were no security cameras, no sounds except for my own sneakers, squeaking and the soft flickering of fluorescent tubes. But when you're about to crap yourself, you stop being picky. I shoved through the door into the men's room, and the lights flickered, then came back on. Dimmer than before, not totally dark, just that kind of low orange hue that makes everything look jaundiced. I picked the only clean stall, sat down and tried to relax, but the silence was too much, even for a bathroom. No humming, no AC, nothing. And then I heard a noise, not from outside, but beneath me. Under the floor, something dragging, slow and heavy, like a wet rope being pulled across linoleum. I froze. It went silent. Then again, this time closer, like it knew where I was. I wiped, stood up, flushed. And when I opened the stall door, I swear the room was longer. The tiles stretched too far. The mirrors looked fogged, and there were more sinks than before, more urinals. Like the place had stretched itself, I called out thinking, maybe I was just freaked out, but my voice sounded wrong, swallowed up like the room was padded. I moved to the door, and it wouldn't open. No lock, just wouldn't move. I shoved, kicked, nothing. So I looked for another exit. Maybe maintenance, maybe a vent. And that's when I saw it, a panel in the far wall slightly ajar, as if someone had left it open in a hurry. I walked over, pulled it wider, and saw a short corridor behind it, dimly lit, same yellowed tile, and I thought maybe it led to the janitor's closet or a service route out. So I stepped in, and the panel shut behind me. Not slammed, just clicked, shut so quietly it made me shiver. I turned immediately, tried to open it, but it was gone, not locked. Gone, like a wall had grown in its place. I was trapped in a hallway that shouldn't exist. No doors, just a path stretching forward with no end. And the smell, oh God, the smell, like wet carpet and old meat. I walked for what felt like hours passing. Identical lights overhead, all buzzing. Some blinking randomly, the tiles changed without warning to stained carpet, then to plain concrete, and then back to tile again, and somewhere behind me I heard the dragging again, slow, deliberate, heavier. Like it was following my pace, I ran, turned corners, found more hallways that all looked the same. Every so often I'd see things out of place, a broken child's toy, a shoe with no foot inside a pile of salt that had been carefully arranged in a circle, and once a door. I sprinted to it and opened it, only to find another hallway behind it. Same lights, same floor, same terrible buzzing. It never stopped, and every now and then I'd hear breathing. Not my own ragged panic breathing, but something soft, almost careful, just outside my sight. I think it was watching me, waiting for me to stop moving. I tried not to, but I got tired. I sat once maybe for 5 minutes, but when I stood back up the lights were off, and something had moved closer. I could smell it like rotting plastic and burnt hair. I started running again, my legs aching, throat dry, my body screaming, but I couldn't stop, not here. And then I saw it, a person or something, shaped like one standing in the hall far ahead. still completely still armed at its sides. No face, no clothes, just a blur, like a smudge on reality. I turned around, ran the other way, and saw another one, this one closer. I panicked, tried every door, every panel, every crack I could find, and finally one of the walls gave way. I fell through onto cold tile and looked up expecting the same hallway. But I was back in the mall bathroom. Same light. Same stall door hanging open, but the sinks were off the walls. The mirrors shattered, and the place looked abandoned like it had been for years. I ran outside. The service hallway was pitch black. No lights, no signs, and when I stumbled back into the mall, it was empty. Not closed, but vacant. Like no one had been there in a decade. The skylights were cracked, the escalators dead vines hanging from the railings. I found an exit, ran into the parking lot, which was covered in dust and weeds. My car gone, no. People nothing, just silence. I don't know how long I wandered before I saw headlights and flagged down a car, and the man inside looked at me like I was crazy and asked if I needed a hospital. I said no, just help. And he drove me to a station where I called my mom, but she didn't pick up the address I gave them. Didn't exist, and the mall I described had been demolished years ago. I'm home now. I think maybe it let me go, or maybe this is another version of it, and I'm still lost. I've always loved museums, the quiet, the reverence, the way time seems to stretch and hold its breath between the bones of things long dead. It was a rainy Thursday, and I had taken the day off work to clear my head. So I wandered into the old Natural History Museum downtown, the kind that still smells like varnished wood and dust and echoes in strange places where it shouldn't. I moved slowly through the exhibits, reading plaques, studying fossils, marveling at how much older the world is than we think and how small we really are. I was in the lower level near the taxidermy wing when I noticed something strange. A hallway I didn't recognize, dimly lit with an old velvet rope hanging loosely to one side. It wasn't marked, but I thought maybe it was a staff area or a side exhibit I hadn't seen before. I stepped under the rope expecting someone to call out, but no one did. I walked into the hallway, and immediately the air changed, heavier, colder, like stepping into a basement that hadn't seen light in decades. The lights buzzed faintly above me, flickering in a sickly yellow, and the walls were a faded wallpaper, the kind with a repeating pattern that seems to move if you stare too long. I kept going thinking, maybe I'd find a way back into the main exhibit. But the hallway stretched impossibly far, and soon I realized there were no doors, just endless wall and that smell. It started soft like old glue and mildew, then stronger, like rotting carpet and something chemical, something wrong. I turned around to go back, but the hallway behind me was different. The rope was gone, the walls slightly warped and breathing. Or maybe that was just the sound of my own panic. I tried my phone, but there was no signal, no clock, no sense of time at all. I walked and walked, turning corners that shouldn't exist, finding alcoves with old furniture worn and stained, with names scratched into them, names I swore I recognized. One of them was mine, carved deep, like someone had been waiting for me. I ran then, fast, heart pounding, hearing something behind me. Something. Not walking, but crawling, dragging its weight with wet thuds against the floor. The lights began to fade one by one, as if swallowed. I found a stairwell with no railing leading down into pure blackness, and when I turned to go another way, the corridor behind me had vanished as if erased, like a dream collapsing. I was trapped, and every second that passed I could feel something watching, not with eyes, but with intent, the kind that lives under skin and teeth. I screamed, but the sound died in my throat like the walls refused to carry it. I saw a mirror once, just propped against the wall, cracked and stained, and when I looked into it, my reflection didn't move with me. It just stared, smiling, not with joy, but with hunger. I kicked it over and kept going. The hall started to tilt slightly upward, and I had to lean forward to move, and then downward, like walking through the throat of something alive. Always that sound behind me, sometimes close, sometimes distant, but never gone. I passed doors that weren't real, painted onto the wall, windows with no glass and signs written in gibberish symbols. I felt sick, not just in my stomach, but in my mind, like reality was unraveling and something older was slipping through. I found a room, once just a small square space with a single chair in the center and a speaker in the corner playing a looped recording of someone sobbing, slowly distorted, as if melting. And when I turned to leave, the door was gone again, the walls shifting subtly like muscle. I think I passed the same hallway 3 times, or maybe 100. I don't know anymore. There's no day or night. Just that buzz of the lights and the pulsing hum behind the walls. Once I heard my mother's voice calling my name, but she's been dead for 5 years. I didn't follow it. I knew better. Somehow, I knew it wasn't her. The worst part is not knowing if you're still in the same world, if you've slipped somewhere else completely. I stopped looking for a way out after what felt like days. My body aches. My mouth is dry, but I don't starve. Not exactly. I sleep sometimes. But when I wake up, the halls are different, as if the place is rearranging itself around me. I write messages to myself in the dust, hoping I can map it. But they disappear the next time I pass by. I saw another person once, far down a hallway, walking slowly, the back of their head familiar, and I called out, but they didn't turn, just kept walking. And when I ran to catch up, they vanished into a door that slammed shut behind them. I opened it and found only a blank wall. The lights flickered and the buzz became a scream and the smell came back strong. And I knew I had to keep moving because the crawling sound was closer, louder now, always louder. Sometimes I hear laughter from behind the walls, high-pitched and childlike, and it makes my skin crawl because it's never coming from a child. I used to think I'd find a way out, that someone would rescue me. But now I think this place is alive and it feeds on hope. It started as a weekend escape, a high-rise casino resort lit with gold and glass against the Nevada dusk, a place my girlfriend Mara and I picked to forget our real lives for just a few nights. The floor buzzed with the clinking of chips, the muted cheers of gamblers, the warm scent of high-end perfume mixed with cigarette smoke and money. We'd just finished a few rounds of roulette, still giddy from a modest win, when Mara said she needed the restroom, and I followed behind, half drunk, laughing, loving the shine of it all. We walked past the slots, down a less crowded hallway, past a security door left ajar with no signage, just a quiet hum of air conditioning coming from behind it. Mara peeked in and said, "This must be employee only or something." But then she giggled and nudged the door open more and stepped inside. I followed a step behind, and in that instant the door shut behind us without a sound, and just like that it was gone. No door, no hallway, no casino, just yellowed, stained carpet stretching endlessly under flickering fluorescent lights overhead, walls covered in the same putrid yellow wallpaper that stank faintly of mildew, and something else I couldn't place yet. Something wrong. I reached back to find the door and hit nothing but wall, smooth and unbroken, as if it had never existed. Mara called my name, a tremor already in her voice, as the hum grew louder, somehow vibrating in my teeth, like the sound was inside my head. We started walking, thinking maybe we'd wandered into some strange maintenance wing of the hotel, some back access corridors, except they didn't end. They didn't lead anywhere. The more we moved, the more it stretched, and nothing changed except the details that made your brain itch just to look at them. The way corners didn't meet quite right. How the light fixtures seemed to double back on themselves. The feeling that someone had been standing just out of frame every time we turned a corner. But there was never anyone there. Then the walls changed subtly, like the pattern shifted slightly, but enough to notice if you stared long enough. And that smell, the mildew, it thickened, like something rotting behind the walls. Mara was getting scared. I could hear it in her breathing, short, sharp, the way her shoes slapped the floor louder than they should have, in a space that felt endless. And then came the sound from the distance. Not footsteps, not breathing, not talking. Something skittering, fast, jerky, like claws on concrete, but too fast to be natural. I told Mara to stop moving, and we listened, and I swear to God, whatever it was, stopped when we did. It knew we were there. We ran. I don't know how long. The lights began flickering in patterns, not randomly, somehow in sync with our movements, like they were reacting to us. And then we passed a corner and the air changed, cold and wet like a basement after a flood, and the carpet squished under our feet. Mara started crying, keening low like an animal, and I grabbed her hand and pulled her on, and we came into a room that was different. It had no lights, just black walls, ceiling, even the floor was black, and it was silent. No buzzing, just our breathing, until something moved in the farthest corner. It didn't look human. It didn't look like anything I could understand. Just a shape with too many angles, and none of them right, and I swear its eyes, if they were eyes, glowed like the emergency lights on an airplane, dim and red and watching. I couldn't breathe. I felt my bladder nearly give out, and Mara froze, her mouth open like she wanted to scream but couldn't make a sound. The thing began crawling toward us, slowly, deliberately, its limbs unfolding with soft cracks like breaking sticks in the dark. I turned and ran back into the yellow room, dragging Mara behind me, not looking back, even though I could hear it speeding up behind us, scraping faster now. I don't know how long we ran, how many turns we took, how many halls we crossed that looked identical until they didn't. Some with doors that led to brick walls, some with steps going down forever, some with lights that turned off as you approached them. We stopped again only because Mara collapsed, crying and wheezing, her legs giving out beneath her, and I sat with her, and I held her, and we waited. And then the hum began again, low and growing, like a plane overhead, but never fading, never moving, just growing louder and louder, and then it spoke. Not in words, but in thoughts, images of rooms that breathed and walls that pulsed and places deeper than death, where things waited that had never been born. I don't remember sleeping, but I must have, because when I woke up, Mara was gone. No sound, no trace. Just my fingernails bloodied from scratching the walls until they cracked. I screamed for her until my voice turned to static. I still haven't found her. I don't think I ever will. I walk these halls endlessly now. Sometimes the wallpaper peels back to show meat. Sometimes the lights hum in lullabies. Sometimes I hear her voice around a corner. But when I turn, it's that thing just mimicking her. It was supposed to be just another Friday night hangout at Evan's house, a weathered 2-story rental on the edge of town, surrounded by acres of old pine and silence. We'd all been friends since high school, me, Evan, Jordan and Bree, and we'd met there for a low-key night of beers and board games in his dimly lit den, where the carpet still smelled like smoke from the previous tenants. About halfway through the night, Jordan pointed out a strange door in the corner, sunken just behind an old bookshelf, pushed flush against the drywall. Said he'd never noticed it before. Evan swore up and down it wasn't there when he moved in, and the landlord had never mentioned a crawl space or closet in that part of the house. We laughed it off, figured it might have been sealed or part of some attic access, until Evan got curious and helped me slide the shelf away, revealing a narrow doorframe painted the same yellowish tan as the walls, but with no handle, just a small circular metal plate embedded where a knob should be. Bree was the first to try pushing it, and to our surprise it swung inward with a slow groan like it hadn't been opened in decades, and what lay beyond wasn't a closet or crawl space, but a narrow corridor, lit by a sickly fluorescent light overhead with wallpaper, the same muted yellow as the door, peeling in long, curling strips. The air that flowed out smelled stale and chemical, something between plastic and mildew, a smell that made your mouth dry and your tongue taste like copper. Evan joked it looked like a Backrooms creepypasta come to life, and I laughed, but it felt forced because something about that hallway was wrong, off in a way that made your brain want to look away, like it knew you weren't supposed to see it. But Jordan stepped through before any of us could stop him, saying it was probably part of the house's foundation, or a forgotten storm shelter, and he called back for us to check it out, before disappearing down a turn just a few feet in. We followed, mostly because the idea of him being alone in there didn't sit right with any of us, and that's when we made the biggest mistake of our lives. Once we stepped inside and turned the same corner, there was no door behind us, no opening, no Evan's den, no bookshelf, just more hallway stretching forever in both directions, and the same buzzing light overhead that never flickered but pulsed, subtly, like it was breathing. We called out for Jordan, but there was no reply, only the low hum that now sounded like it was coming from within the walls themselves, deep and constant like something massive breathing just out of sight. It grabbed Bree's hand as she started to panic, her breath short and sharp, her eyes darting like a trapped animal. And Evan started banging on the wall where the door had been, but it was smooth, unbroken. Like the surface of poured concrete, the floor beneath us felt slightly soft, spongy almost, with a faint give under each step, like walking on flesh padded with water. And I knew then this place wasn't part of the house, wasn't part of anywhere that should exist in the real world. We kept moving, calling Jordan's name and hearing only distant echoes that didn't quite match our voices, like something was repeating them back out of sync, just wrong enough to notice. After what felt like hours, but could have been minutes, Bree said she saw movement down one of the side corridors and ran ahead before we could stop her, and when we followed, she was gone, just gone. Not a scream or sound, just vanished around a bend. We couldn't reach fast enough. The corridor was empty when we got there, but the light above us flickered once, the first time it had done so, and in that flicker I swear I saw her face pressed into the wallpaper, a stretched screaming imprint of her features just beneath the surface, eyes wide, mouth open, and when the light came back it was gone. Evan lost it then, started sobbing, saying this was a nightmare over and over again, while clawing at the walls until his fingers bled, and I had to pull him back before he hurt himself, and that's when the humming stopped completely, replaced by silence so thick I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. And then we heard footsteps, not ours. Something heavier, wet-sounding, like bare feet slapping against tile in a flooded basement, coming from every direction at once but never visible. I told Evan to run, and we did, turning corners blindly, hoping to find a way out, a window, a door, a crack in the wall that would open back into reality. But the place just shifted around us, rooms looping back on themselves, hallways bending impossibly, with corners that led into copies of the same rooms we'd just left, like the place was folding in on itself, with us inside, and somewhere along the way Evan vanished too. I turned for just a second to see if he was still behind me, and when I looked forward again, he was gone. His footsteps silenced in an instant, like he'd fallen through the floor, but the carpet was undisturbed, and the hallway ahead unchanged except for the lights now dimmer. I moved into the building 2 weeks ago, a mid-rise apartment complex built in the 70s with creaky floors, thin walls, and the constant hum of the old elevator shaft rattling through the bones of the place like a heartbeat buried deep in concrete. My lease was cheap, my job remote, and I didn't ask questions, because people don't when they're desperate for a fresh start after everything goes wrong. I'd only met one neighbour, a man named Len, who lived 2 floors up and always looked like he hadn't slept in years, his eyes darting over his shoulder whenever we spoke, like he was waiting for someone to come around the corner and grab him out of his skin. But I brushed it off, chalked it up to the usual city weirdness, until the night it happened. I was heading down to grab a package that the delivery guy left in the lobby at 2 a.m., because apparently that's just a thing now when the elevator doors open to reveal not the usual dim grey interior, but a space that looked wider, deeper, and soaked in a yellow hue that made my stomach churn before I even stepped in. I hesitated, but the hallway behind me flickered like the lights were giving up the ghost, and I figured maybe maintenance had done something weird to the elevator. So I got in, hit the button for the ground floor, and the doors closed behind me without a sound. That's when I knew something was wrong. There was no floor indicator, no light over the door, no humming machinery, just silence and that thick yellow glow like sunlight filtered through nicotine-stained gauze. My stomach dropped, but we weren't moving. The doors never opened again. I tried pressing buttons, all of them. The emergency stop, the alarm. None responded. I pulled out my phone, but there was no signal, no clock, no battery icon, just a frozen screen stuck on the home display like time itself had stalled. Then the walls shifted. Not visibly, but I felt it, a tilt in perspective, a kind of pressure in my ears like descending too fast in a plane, and suddenly the floor beneath me gave way, and I was falling or floating, I can't tell which, before I landed hard on what looked like the same yellow carpet. But now it stretched endlessly in all directions, beneath buzzing fluorescent lights that didn't light anything properly, just cast a dry, pale glow that left shadows in corners that shouldn't exist. I called out at first, thinking maybe I'd glitched into some under-construction basement floor, but my voice sounded wrong, like it was muffled through cotton and echoed back too slow, like the place was considering my words before giving them back. I walked in one direction, then another, but each hallway curved subtly, so you never saw more than 20 feet ahead, and the wallpaper peeled in patterns that looked almost like faces if you let your eyes unfocus. The smell was the worst part, a mix of mold, drywall, and something coppery that made me think of nosebleeds and old meat. I don't know how long I walked before I found the first door. It was slightly ajar with light spilling out, but when I stepped in, it was just another room identical to the last, except it had no exits and the door was gone when I turned to leave. That's when the lights flickered and I saw it. Just for a second. A shape too tall, too thin, with limbs that hung like broken hangers, and a head that twitched with the same rhythm as the humming lights. I didn't scream because I couldn't move. I stood frozen as it slid past the doorway and vanished again, and the silence returned like it had never been interrupted. I waited a long time before opening the door that reappeared behind me, or maybe it was a different door, and the first one had never existed. They all looked the same. I can't tell any more. I tried marking the walls with my keys, but the marks faded after seconds, as if the place healed itself, or just rejected being remembered. I started hearing footsteps behind me after that. Not constant, but always close, soft like barefoot pads on damp carpet, and when I stopped, they stopped, and when I ran, they didn't, but somehow stayed close, as if the distance between us was only in my mind. I found stairs once, a spiral leading down into a black that swallowed the light. But I took them because I had no other option. And at the bottom was a room filled with mirrors, each one cracked in the center, but not broken completely. And in each reflection, I saw myself at different ages, crying, bleeding, screaming, silent. None of them matched my current expression, and I swear one of them looked at me. Before I turned away and ran, I stopped trusting the rooms after that, because they started repeating, but with small differences. One had no ceiling, just a sky of pulsing flesh like lungs breathing in unison. Another had sound, a looping lullaby that my mother used to hum when I had night terrors. And the moment I heard it, I dropped to my knees and sobbed, because I realized I hadn't thought about her in years, and now the place was inside my head, using my memories against me. And just like a nightmare, it was over, and I'm never coming back. I went to the movies alone last Thursday night, something I do when I need to clear my head, lose myself in a story, pretend life isn't gnawing at me from all sides. I picked a late showing of a slow burn thriller, something moody and quiet, and the theatre was nearly empty, except for a couple tucked in the back row, and a man in a hoodie sitting 3 seats down from me, head lowered like he was asleep or hiding. Whatever. None of it mattered at the time, because I was too focused on the silence, the eerie absence of trailers or ads, or even that dumb cell phone reminder video. Just the blank screen glowing a dull white like it had been frozen between breaths. I sat there for maybe 10 minutes before checking my phone, then 5 more before I stood up and walked out of the room to find someone. Anyone, maybe the projector guy fell asleep or there was a system glitch. But when I stepped into the hallway, the lights overhead began to flicker. Not like a power surge, more like something was breathing through the walls, deep, slow pulses that dimmed the bulbs with every exhale. I looked left toward the concession area, but it was gone, replaced by a long yellow hallway that hadn't been there before, not even a door, just more of the theatre carpet stretching forward into flickering fluorescence and that hum, low and constant like the bass of a theatre subwoofer left on with no source playing. I turned to go back into the screening room and the door was gone, replaced with seamless wallpaper that matched the rest of the hall, and my heart dropped because nothing felt right anymore. None of this made sense. I hadn't taken anything, no meds, no drinks, no weed, nothing to explain why my reality had just unraveled into a place that felt sick and wrong and artificial, like a dream you don't know you're in, until something looks just a little off and suddenly you can't wake up. I called out for help, then again louder, but the only answer was my own voice echoing back, slightly delayed and warped, like it had to travel through something thick and wet before reaching my ears. I walked forward because what else could I do? Step by step into corridors that curved subtly, so you could never see more than 30 feet ahead, and each turn brought me deeper into a maze that never ended. Some rooms were larger, with sagging stained carpet and walls that bulged inward, like they were tired of holding themselves up. Others were narrow and hot, like something had been breathing in there recently and left the air damp and human. Once I thought I heard another person, footsteps faint and fast like someone running barefoot just ahead of me. But when I followed, they always stopped around the next corner, and I was alone again. Until I wasn't, I heard whispering first, not words exactly. More like syllables whispered backwards just behind the walls, faint but insistent like static that meant something. And the more I listened, the more I felt it crawling under my skin like my nerves had become antennae for whatever was talking to me through the drywall. I stopped listening and tried running, tried screaming, tried pounding my fists against the walls until they bled, but the place didn't care. It just absorbed the sound, like it had always been empty, always been hungry. Eventually I came to a room that looked like a lobby. The kind you'd see in a dentist's office from the 80s. Green vinyl chairs and a silent TV mounted in the corner, playing a children's cartoon on loop where the characters had no faces and only spoke in clicks and squeals, and when I blinked they all turned to look at me at once without eyes. And I ran through a door that hadn't been there and ended up back in the hallway. But now the lights were dimmer and the hum louder, more erratic, like it was angry I'd left that room. I lost track of time. Could have been minutes, could have been hours or days. The deeper I went, the more the place changed. Some sections smelled like hospitals and ammonia, others like rotting meat and mouldy paper. Once I stepped into a room where the floor was soft and spongy, and when I looked down, it wasn't carpet, but skin, pale and veined and pulsing beneath my feet. I screamed and fell backwards through a doorway that vanished behind me. And that's when I stopped trying to find a way out, because I didn't believe one existed anymore. I started to think maybe I had died. Maybe this was some forgotten part of the afterlife, where the universe throws broken souls that never fit anywhere else, a place that just loops and mutates and watches. You start to feel it after a while, the presence. Not a person, but the place itself, watching you with a mind not built for empathy, just observation and mimicry. Once I saw a mirror in a hallway, and when I looked into it, I saw myself staring back. But my reflection blinked before I did and smiled when I hadn't, and I smashed it. But there was no sound, just a flicker in the lights and a low growl like static wrapped around teeth. And then I woke up. Just like that, I was back in the theatre, seated in my seat.
If you enjoyed the journey and survived it, don't forget to like the video, share it with someone who sleeps too easily, and subscribe for more original horror stories delivered straight into your nightmares. And if you have a true tale or twisted idea you'd like me to bring to life, leave it in the comments below. I read them all. Some of my favorite stories come from minds just like yours. And so the final candle is burned out, but some stories never really end. They wait in the corners of your mind, and now so must you. You have heard the incantations of the demised, the shadows sworn to secrecy. But what slipped through, what followed you back into the light, if these stories stirred something inside you, if they made you hesitate before turning off the lights, then don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because next time, we're going deeper. So rest while you can, because next time the story just might be about you.